Hi, welcome to the segment on democracy versus fascism. This will build on what I talked about in the first few clips. I talked about the liberal view of history, which is that we're on an upward slope and society will naturally become more inclusive. I talked about the pushback we can expect. I talked about authoritarians and non-authoritarians. All this leads to two different forms of government that appeal to different kinds of people. By coincidence, or not, the form of government that appeals to authoritarians also appeals to the Republican Party for various reasons. Okay, so German sociologist Max Weber, in his classic essay, Politics is Vocation, written in 1919, outlined three sources of authority for government. The first is traditional. This is the authority underlying monarchies. This says we looked at this particular family as an authority because that's how we've always done it. This form of government has obvious problems and is exactly what the drafters of our Constitution did not want. The second form of government is legal rational, or rule of law. This is where the underlying authority for the government is the law. This kind of government strives for fairness, and it's the form of authority we have in democracies. This one, too, has some intrinsic problems. For example, it strives for fairness, but can never be completely fair. Why? Because there's always pushback, and because the institutions of democracy are carried out by mere mortals. What do I mean by the institutions of democracy? I mean all those good ideas that the founders had that I talked about in the first clip. An independent judiciary, prosecutorial independence. The third form of government is what Weber calls personal charisma, which is a source of authority underlying dictatorships and fascist regimes. Today we might say demagogue, or cult leader, or strongman. So one of the first scholars to study fascism was Robert O. Paxton. He called fascism a cult of leadership, and he described the characteristics of fascists. He said they tend to fall in line behind a leader. They move in lockstep. They like to have a uniform or identifying clothing. MAGA hats, anyone? Sounds to me a lot like the authoritarian personality. So it's obvious who a leadership cult appeals to. It appeals to people who look to an authority figure and who want to fall in line behind an authority figure. So Paxton also said that the world's first fascist regime was not actually born in Italy. He said the first fascist group was a Ku Klux Klan. He said, look, they even have a uniform, those white sheets. Okay, so Yale professor Jason Stanley also studies fascism, and he talks about the leadership principle. This is the idea, a myth, that the leader is infallible, that his tuition is better than the academics and the experts, and that he embodies the mythic destiny of the nation. Trump is a classic. He made no secret that he believes his authority draws from his own instincts. Remember, he knows more about the military matters than the generals. So fascism is based on myth. Remember, white supremacy is a myth. One of the myths that we see across fascist regimes is the we were once pure and good and outsiders are defiling our nation. Okay, that's what makes America great again, is based on. It's a desire to loop backwards to a mythic time when all was good. Now, the first thing a fascist leader has to do, according to Yale professor Timothy Snyder, is clear away factuality so that myth can take hold. If fascism rests on myth, rule of law, in contrast, requires a shared factuality. A court of law doesn't work if half the jury believes alternate facts. So fascism and democracy can't exist together. To exist, fascism must destroy truth. To exist, rule of law must uphold truth. Now, the fascist leader comes to power through legal means. After he's in power, he begins assaulting and taking apart rule of law and democratic institutions. This is why fascism didn't appear on the world stage until the old monarchies broke down and democracy began to take hold in Europe. Now remember, a lot of people don't like democracy. I'll expand on that later. The charismatic leader offers an appealing alternative. Now, I said that fascism appeals to people who prefer an authority figure to rule of law. It also appeals to people who want to dismantle the federal government because fascism destroys democracy. So I'm going to wrap this one up because I promised to keep these short. I hope you'll join me for the next video installment of how we got here and how we can get out. Thank you.